Aphoristic appendage to On Truthtelling. 751 to 800. 751. It's possible that, in the political sphere at least, liberal thought has opened itself up so much as to become narrow, that it has made being tolerant in some areas synonymous with being intolerant in others. If this is so, then it has opened up a vital contradiction in itself that makes it a prime target for what perhaps it itself strives to be nowadays, namely, a moral crusade. 752. The problem with the common political epithets and slogans of the day is that, being bandied about day and night, they become like much-handled coins so worn they are virtually useless. At least, this is their fate unless some way is found to newly mint them. 753. Propaganda is certainly efficient in one way and perhaps in one way alone. It convinces those who uphold only weakly a point of view or set of beliefs to join forces with those who uphold them strongly to form one solid front. 754. If the objective of learning were to be as fair as possible in one's judgment of a matter, then the whole would never be judged by the part, which of course is the common practice, but rather the part always by the whole, which involves great effort and is therefore rare. 755. Partisan politics simplified, on one side, people overflowing with the milk of human kindness and on the other, rapacious devils. Or, on one side, egregious hypocrites and on the other, staunch defenders of time-honored values. 756. The art of journalism in the mainstream media is holding everyone and everything to account in the public arena except itself. 757. Virtue's name can serve self-interest as well as vice and, in this way, become a vice. 758. The hard perhaps unacceptable truth is that, if this magnificent world weren't a horrible place at least to some degree, it wouldn't interest us to the highest degree. 759. Yes, it's true. The left in politics, generally speaking, puts a more human face on things. Without it, the attitude would forever be business as usual. 760. Most people don't fear or hate the sin itself but rather the disclosure of it, the condemnation of it, the punishment of it, and, in some cases, the controversy surrounding it. 761. Yes, I'm reading this great person's work. It's a bit sad to think he's forgotten it entirely. He doesn't remember even a word of it. Why, you ask? Why, quite simply, it's out of his mind because he's out of this world. Of course, that's all normal and natural, but it's still a bit sad to think what he labored so hard and so long over means nothing to him now. 762. It's amazing the number of people on popular forums who think that heaping abuse on others wins their argument. 763. The world is like a large pie. Everyone wants their piece of it. Indeed, some countries want a very large piece. It's in this context that world peace sets out on its impossible mission. 764. The things that are given in life are probably the greatest blessings we will ever receive. And yet, for the simple reason they are given, we often treat them as if they were as cheap as air and water and as dispensable as dirt. 765. Ad hominem arguments and personal attacks should always be considered a sign of weakness. However, given that they are often taken to be the opposite, namely, a sign of strength, and given they are often used by both skilled and unskilled speakers alike, one may ask, what's going on? Why is this the case? The answer must be that, in order to be perceived for what they are, namely, as a sign of weakness, the majority of people would have to be what they are not, namely, full of patience, probity, and wisdom. Often it takes a great amount of time for them to get past old prejudices and be in accord with sound argument and objective findings. 766. If it weren't for the fact that many famous and successful people are struck and sometimes struck down by scandal, many other people would never have the opportunity to think of themselves as being superior to, if only for a moment, the best and the brightest. 767. For most of us, safety and security are what we want over the long haul. But when it comes to the hour by hour, minute by minute, second by second beat of life, the safe and secure cannot be entirely separated from what, like immense suffering, is absolutely intolerable, namely, immense boredom. 768. When generalizations are treated as if they were as certain as particular observations, they are likely a product of poor as much as good reasoning. 769. It's like a feeding frenzy among animals when people dispute over some moral or political issue. They will attack and tear away at their opponents and sometimes even their allies with all the ferocity that human beings are capable of this side of physical confrontation. 770. What starts off as a matter of taste, preference, custom, or tradition, as would be the case, for example, if someone said, "I've always lived in the city and couldn't possibly live anywhere else," eventually becomes moralized, as would be the case, for example, if this person said, "It's far better to live in the city and for a number of good reasons," which in turn eventually becomes politicized, as would be the case, for example, if this same person now said, "Everyone should and in fact must live as we do in the city or else." 771. Politics can never be entirely removed from persecution, from injustice because it always falls short of being an entirely unanimous affair. 772. Nietzsche said that all higher civilizations are founded on cruelty. This is an extreme claim only if their wealth isn't founded on war. 773. It's not as difficult as one might think to put the armor of hardness about one's heart. Pride, power, position, profit, practice, not to mention fear, anger, resentment, revenge, ignorance, and necessity, are all capable of doing this. 774. Virtually everyone can be nice, pleasant, agreeable, and respectful in favorable circumstances. The real challenge is to be all these things, but perhaps not with all people, for this would be asking too much, in unfavorable ones. 775. Thinking for oneself means being suspicious of all public, popular, and professional opinion that treats the important points of a matter as if they were already decided and settled. 776. It may be that way down deep in the religious or quasi-religious psyche, what is felt is both a duty and a desire not to think. 777. When a politician or political commentator has a string of accusations but no line of argument, he's not much better than a paid propagandist. 778. At first you outlived your childhood and, well, that was okay, but it didn't get any easier. Then you outlived your adolescence and, well, that was okay, but it didn't get any easier. Then you outlived your youth and, well, that was okay, but it didn't get any easier. Then you outlived your middle and later years and, well, that was okay, but it didn't get any easier. Then you died and it finally became easier. 779. When it comes to analyzing moral problems in public, it's virtually impossible to do so without merely a semblance of being cold and objective. The reason for this is as simple to state as it's difficult to formulate into an acceptable principle. The general understanding is that we have both good and evil in the world, that these two are not only distinct but radically opposed, and that, even for analytical reasons, if one mixes or confounds the two, one is not only making a mistake but doing evil or, at the very least, something close to it. 780. When things, people, places, and events don't have any obvious or lasting effect on us, then it's likely they'll be washed down some memory hole from which they can only be retrieved, if they can be at all, with some extraordinary effort or special tool such as a written record. 781. All who combine youth with perfect physical form belong to a minority of privileged godlike creatures who live and work among us and who, sadly enough, are destined to quit this role and this magnificent stage. But were it not so, how much envy might become murderous. 782. When we are 20 or thereabouts, we often don't see our future, at least with any anticipation or excitement, going much beyond the age of 30 or 35. It's as if we were all so many Alexanders who, taking a view of what should happen in between, see only one thing, a string of conquests. 783. Melodrama with its hero on the one side and villain on the other has always been one of the most popular forms of narrative. It should not be surprising then that the media, being in the business of selling a product, puts its truth-telling in this form. 784. The present can be a rather sad time for those who've enjoyed past glory but, for some reason or other, outlived it. How much more so then, if such things can be quantified, for those who've always wanted to achieve great things but, even in their own eyes, failed to do so. 785. One of the advantages of knowing how precarious life is for each and every one of us is that it then becomes difficult to be envious of anyone, or at least more difficult than otherwise. 786. Virtue practiced but seldom preached will always have a more profound and lasting effect than virtue preached but seldom practiced. 787. Every individual is so indebted to society and the world at large for what they are as a human being that, if all humanity suddenly became aware of this, if it were suddenly stricken by this indebtedness that no one can escape and no one can think about except briefly or on the fly, apart from the deeply spiritual man or woman, egotism itself would be wiped out and most if not all functioning parts of society. 788. The greatest insight one might ever have is that nothing has to be exactly the way it is and that everything and anything can change and even change dramatically. If anyone doubts this, let them think for a moment of the infinite variety of animals and plants in the world not only now but over millions of years. 789. Being feminine and growing old means losing one's attractiveness, and being masculine and growing old means losing one's strength. But let's not fool ourselves one way or the other about these propositions, which go against the thinking of the times to some extent, for we're only talking about one kind of attractiveness and one kind of strength and nothing else. 790. Replacing arguments with accusations is the quickest way to go for those with an agenda. 791. To think that much of what is now considered to be fresh, new, advanced, and groundbreaking will one day seem as dated as many things in the past. But of course this is not the usual attitude, which is that what we have created, invented, thought anew, and taken pride in will go on forever, rising every day like a new sun. 792. As much as we might condemn it, stupidity is entertaining if it doesn't affect us adversely. 793. As much as we condemn it, and we condemn it far more than stupidity, evil is entertaining, but who dares admit this, if it doesn't affect us adversely or only up to a certain point? 794. Human curiosity spans all limits except those that make us weary, uncomfortable, or frightened, and sometimes it even exceeds them. 795. To think that society will rid itself of hateful speech and acts while politics remains their privileged playground. 796. Having good intentions but being dishonest is no better than having bad intentions but being honest. 797. The will to power is such that what is not the norm but feels itself to be in the ascendancy will construe itself as the norm until it may in fact end up so. 798. For those who are lucky, the mind is the strongest muscle in the body. 799. Only information taken to heart yields changes or true commitment. 800. If life weren't nuanced to the nth degree, what need would we have of poetry?